Yeah, how do you determine that?
The Department of Workforce Services is going to be the arbitrage. Is it critical to the employer's opinion of what health, safety, and welfare is, or is it the opinion of Workforce Services? That's where that other word was. We were going to ask her.
Chairman Nicholas, we are live.
Okay. I've jumped back into House Appropriations, reviewing on re-referrals on several bills working with the Workforce Services. So do we have Jason, are you on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
For some reason, I can't start my video. Somebody has to allow me to, I think. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just get started. Thank you for reconvening. My apologies. I had some computer issues here. I was admitted to the room and then I couldn't do anything. So, but I thought it was important that we made ourselves available to you to kind of give you, our perspective from Workforce Services as to how this bill is probably going to affect us. So,
Absolutely. So please, why don't you just provide us a narrative on what your thoughts? Did you hear what we did?
Yes, I had the advantage of hearing what was going on, but I couldn't say anything or wave my arms or anything. So,
So just yeah. And I take it you heard the testimony of the kind of outline why we did what we did. But the impacts to you, please fire away.
sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as I think you guys have discussed, Section 2 is the meat of this bill that affects Department of Workforce Services. As we look through it, it really does three things in Section 2. It creates a vaccine approval plan by which somebody in our agency is going to have to take those vaccine approval plans that employers might want and either approve or deny them, I guess. It sets up a severance pay issue where if the person is let go as a result of the vaccine mandate, they would be eligible for severance pay, which of course, again, our staff is going to have to take those claims and investigate them and get people their money. So, and then lastly, of course, the testing program, which I think you guys discussed heavily with Dr. Harris from Department of Health and Director Johansson as well. So those are the three issues, we see. I think it's important just to note that our Labor Standards Division, which is currently where I kind of see this Section 2, the bulk of the responsibility landing, is a all general funded program. We do get a little bit of federal funds for fair employment claims that we investigate in relation to Title VII of the Civil Rights Act per a work share agreement that we have with EEOC. Unfortunately, these investigations would not fall under that, so we would not be eligible for any federal reimbursement on these types of claims. So, I think just kind of going back to the 2020 budget cuts, we had previously reallocated 3 positions out of this area, both because we needed the people elsewhere, and it did also help us cut our general funds pretty substantially. So we are down staff in that area. And so a program like this, we really see it's really hard to tell how much work it will add. I can tell you from our perspective where we stand already, caseload wise is we get a fair amount we get about 170 fair employment claims a year, thereabout. And, though most of you probably know those are fairly time intensive investigations to complete. And we also take wage claims, which are a little bit easier to investigate. So long story short, I think just want the committee to know that, we do see this kind of adding some responsibilities to the agency, of course. And I think with an already understaffed unit, we could be, looking at backlogs with of things which might further frustrate, the public. So
Jason, I'm just looking at the bill. It doesn't really have, there's no proviso in it to basically pay you to run the program. And so in terms of what we can do, all we can do is add and subtract on the dollar amounts in the bill. But what I can say is that we are putting together a group bill to modify House Bill 1001. And we would, in that bill, just as an amendment, we'd be happy to stick in a provision to help fund what you're doing.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think that would be welcomed by our agency, and as we've discussed this, again, I think we just got this bill Thursday or Friday and, kind of feverishly working through the fiscal impact statement as we do. We had even thought possibly about leveraging some of our third-party sources that we already have under contract for different things that might be able to take on some of this additional work if that's needed. So.
Go ahead.
So, Jason, if I may, I've got several questions. I'll ask one at a time because in your dealings with employment and employers, can you think of any other situation where we tell an employer that they have to provide an alternative place for an employee to work if they can't, they hire on to work in one place and for whatever conditions, except for maybe pregnancy, we tell them that they have to provide a different place for them to work and that they have to stay employed?
It's working from home.
Mr. Chairman, I think, are you referring to like that reasonable, I forget the terminology, reasonable accommodation?
I am.
Okay. So I think, just off the top of my head, no, I can't think of any other areas in law where we do that currently.
Do we require employers to submit any place else a document to you that says the conditions of an employment are critical, like we do on page 5 in Roman I?
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't believe so.
So then, Jason, do we, and where I was referring to earlier is on page 6, where the employer provides reasonable alternative measures to the employee. And you said no. Is there any place else in law that we require an employer to have a reassignment, to provide a reassignment of work duties? Or is that kind of left for the employer to determine?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I think I guess my answer to that would be not in state law, to my knowledge. There's no other place in that. I know as an employer, in certain provisions, I think, like medical provisions, the employer needs to work towards a reasonable accommodation to,
like perhaps like the ADA or Fair Labor.
Correct. That's Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, yes.
Okay. Do we ever in other law require the employer to pay severance packages?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, no, not currently.
Okay.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Jason, moving on to page 13 in section 5, It's asking that the Department of Workforce Services set up a program to administer COVID testing and antibody testing. Would you rather have that just simply be the Department of Health, since that's who's already doing it?
Mr.
And
Chairman.
on any other thoughts you might have, Jason, in that
Sure.
regard?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yeah, I know Director Cooley, who's also online here, has talked with Director Johansson, just about how we would go about procuring those tests. It would certainly make sense to me if like you guys had discussed, I think previously, Department of Health is kind of already set up for a possible program like that, where, if something like this language were to pass, where we could direct the employers who had an approved mandate to get the tests as, a reasonable accommodation through the Department of Health, I guess.
Jason, is there
Thank
any
you.
way we can take that 300 some odd million for rent relief and use it for part of this?
Mr. Chairman, you guys are the appropriators. I just follow what you appropriate.
Learn why.
Anything else? Any other concerns, Jason?
So I think, Mr. Chairman, the only other concern I think is just, and I think you guys touched on it in some of your other discussions. Chairman Nicholas, I think you had brought it up, the ramping up a program like this. I think there's some concern on our side about how effective we could be. One, we got to get it set up. We got to pass emergency rules. There's some other things going on there that, for a period of 5 months, I just have some concerns about ramping up that program and doing it effectively for only that 5-month period. And Mr. Chairman, I think, and I may have lost you. This is when my computer went out on me, but I think you had made a comment regarding section 5 or 6. And my understanding was that the section 6 really terminates all provisions of section 2 the earlier of March 31st or until all court stuff is exhausted.
Right.
Okay.
So all I can tell you is that there will be an amendment to take that last phrase out.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think that's really all I had. And again, I my apologies for not being there in person and for the computer issues. And I would defer to Director.
The way that I ran the meeting was pretty we were bouncing all over the place. So it was probably more my fault than yours.
No problem. I appreciate it. And I don't know if Director Cooley has any words or.
So, and we will also bring, number one, if this stays in and DFS is required to do certain things, we will request money for it. We'll make an amendment for that. So what you might do, Robin, is just come up with an estimate. If you want 2 AWACS or at-wills to, in order to implement it, and as we go, and then I'm pretty sure that the Senate appropriations will, depending on what comes out of our house and what comes out of their house, we'll figure out a way to get something like that into your, as a budget line into this thing. And we'll just see what duties. There's also going to be a motion just to get rid of all of section 2, which would make life a lot easier for you as well. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Ryan. I appreciate you getting us back in here. Mr. Chairman, if I may, there was one other thing as I'm reading through this again. One other thing I noticed that caused me a little bit of concern, if that section 3 does remain in there and we start talking about the severance pay, there is no enforcement mechanism in there that I see. The enforcement mechanism up above that in section B talks about committing an unfair employment practice. And then there's a severance pay that we would come in and we would enforce. But what if we get an employer that does not pay that? There's no enforcement technique or remedy beyond that for us to take action if that severance pay is not paid. So just another thought on that just jumped out at me. So again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate you opening this back up for us and allowing us to provide you a little bit more information.
Yep, and anything else comes up, just shoot us an email, give me a call, whatever. 'Cause we'll be happy to try to fix it.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.